So, Michael, what was the genesis of writing 50 Words?
Well, it's part of a trilogy, and
Yeah.
it started with a play called What the Night Is For. Now it's called Do Not Disturb. That was done in London about 6, 7 years ago, and then I wrote the two other plays based on the man and the woman in that play, and one of them was 50 Words.
Digging deep and writing such uncompromising, almost voyeuristic relationship drama. How do you find that gear?
Well, it was mainly that when I saw other plays, I just thought they were bullshit. You know, they were just being very superficial. And I thought, why make people think that that's the way it really is when it's not? You know, it's better off. They're better off knowing how gnarly things get, so they realize their life is really fine. You know, they're not any different than anybody else.
How much did you intentionally put economic matters into the script to make it a plot line?
Oh, I didn't mean to make it a plotline ever. I meant that the point I was making about both of them was that there was a disappointment that had entered the life of the man when his architectural early meteoric success didn't pan out. And I felt that that follows the timeline of most American lives. They start with a lot of promise because we're told we can do anything and be president one day. And the truth is, of course, all we can be is ourselves. And if we're promised too much, at a certain moment in our life when we wake up and realize it's not going to happen that way, there's a sort of disappointment that sets in.
What are the challenges of a two-character, single-location play, keeping the audience engaged in a journey over one night? It's very compressed in terms of only having two characters, one location, and a linear timeline. What are the challenges of that?
Well, you have to pull a lot of tricks out of the bag. You know, you have to keep the audience in suspense about how things are going to turn out by a lot of little feints and a lot of little, like for instance in 50 Words, each scene ends in a way that makes you think the next beat is pretty inevitable. But when it begins, it's something rather surprising has happened in the meantime. And as the audience is catching up with their expectation of the next scene and trying to square it with what they see happening on stage, you've got their interest for a while because they have a new mystery to solve. Like, what? Wait a minute! I thought they were going upstairs to make love. What's happened here? You know?
Is it asking a lot of an audience to actually go further into themselves, to go to the theater expecting a harsh dose of reality? You think that's more challenging for a contemporary audience than it might have been 20, 30 years ago?
Well, it's less of a habit for sure. So people who go have to really enjoy it, but that's fine. I mean, that just means that your audience is going to be a little more self-selecting than it used to be, and you roll with that.
Right. You've written for both screen and stage. Do you have a preference, and what are some of the differences between the two?
Well, I've written for, and I've also written for television, and yeah, there's huge differences. You know, so many that I can't even begin to explain it. I mean, when you do write television and film, you're almost always writing for hire. So there's a filtering of your own work through producers, investors, distributors, people who have product to sell, and you have to kind of pull your punches a little bit when you work that way. So I feel that I have to go about my work with a little more self-consciousness when I'm writing film or television. I try to still keep it real, but there's no doubt that if you have to take a break in a television show every 10 minutes or whatever, you have to use other tricks to get people interested again, and you have to leave out certain aspects of human nature that might be difficult for people sitting at the end of a day at home and inviting you into their living rooms. Then if they went out, got themselves to the theater, bought a ticket, and made the effort to see the story you want to tell. There's a slightly different arrangement you've made with people then. So I would say in my plays I'm a little bit more direct. I feel that they're coming to see what I have to say, as opposed to what a lot of other producers have gotten me to write for them.
What is it about theater? What can theater do that film and television cannot? What is the pitch to an audience? Why is theater a vital and everlasting part of our culture?
It's more direct. I mean, the response that you have in a theater is just much more direct. It's actually been demonstrated that the human brain has in it what they call mirror neurons, which are sets of neuronal responses that directly track what people see in front of them, and they're much more powerfully evoked in a theater than they are when you see a play. I mean, they are evoked when you see film and television, but much more powerfully in the theater. And the thing that's, I think, wonderful in theater is that the audience actually affects the show. Their group response really determines how the actors start to take energy in and direct it back out. And for me, the experience can be, not always is, but can be a great deal richer. Now, there's a lot of people that don't want this. I mean, it could be argued that the reason people like to go to Motel 6 is because they know exactly what they're getting every time, and rather than going to an unknown motel every time they stop for the night. Now, I happen to be the kind of person who likes to go to a different motel every night and doesn't know what they're in for. But that's me. And I think that's a certain kind of adventurous spirit. And those are the people I think that will probably more be drawn to the new theater, the challenging theater, the contemporary writer who's trying to give news about the world they live in. But there are other people who really want to see the known quantity, the hit from Broadway, the familiar, the comfortable, and why not? Kids love to hear the same stories every night when they go to bed. It's just, that's a way people are. I'm not that way. I like something new. I'm always trying to include in a play the context in which it happens, the world that it takes place in, and the ways in which we've organized the world being shown to have a direct effect of some kind on the parameters of the behavior of people on stage. That's been constant. And sometimes it's been much more at the center of the action, as it was in, say, Moonchildren, where there was a threat of being drafted in the case of one person, or a play I did a few years ago called Beast, which was about a zombie and his sidekick from Iraq coming back to find President Bush and thank him for sending them to Iraq. That's much more directly political. But in a play like 50 Words, I would say, the economic disappointment of the man's trajectory, the fact that the woman was going to be a dancer and now she has to do work for crooked people, the fact that they're seeing their marriage as a sort of haven away from the world that's threatening out there. All of that, that's informed by the context that it's written in. The play has in it incredibly tempestuous sex. It has, a kind of thing of, it has a kind of domesticity in it. The patterns and habits of real lived life between people. And then it also has this other thing going on, but it's both, I think.
How do you sway a culture into being more motivated to go to the theater in a time when commitment is a harder thing to ask of people, more so than ever?
Well, I don't see that as my job, really. I write plays, and I hope people will go and see them. I mean, I could be flip and say maybe a Vancouver audience would come and see why it's so nice that they live in Vancouver instead of New York, because people there are probably a lot nicer to each other than they are here.
I think so.
Pardon?
I think Canadians actually have quite a bit of repressed anger. I think Pete would attest to that.
Oh, well, if that's the case, then they should go and see what they're sitting on.